The night my mother-in-law placed a pre-written divorce agreement on my dinner plate in front of 30 members of her wealthy family, I didn't raise my voice. We were gathered at the Vance Grand Ballroom, celebrating Victoria Vance's 60th birthday. It was a lavish affair, with ice sculptures, vintage champagne, and a room full of regional developers and politicians. I sat at the far end of the long white table, wearing a simple off-the-rack suit, surrounded by people who had spent 7 years treating me like a charity case who had married above his station. My wife's brother, Austin, leaned forward, a smug smirk on his face. "Go ahead, Lucas. Open the envelope. Consider it our family's birthday gift to you." Inside the envelope was a legal document detailing the termination of my marriage to Clara, offering me a $50,000 settlement in exchange for walking away with no claims to the family name or assets. Victoria sat at the head of the table, her diamonds catching the chandelier light. "Let's be realistic, Lucas," she said, her voice dripping with cold authority. "You are an independent risk assessor. You make $80,000 a year examining insurance files. Clara is a Vance. She deserves a partner who matches her social standing, not a middle-class clerk who drag her down." I looked at Clara, sitting beside her mother. She didn't look at me. She stared down at her lap, her silence confirming that she had already agreed to this humiliation. She had chosen the prestige of the Vance family name over the husband who had supported her through every difficult night of her life. "Sign it, Lucas," Austin sneered. "We've already had our legal team draft the terms. You'll leave here with enough to buy a nice sedan. It's more than you're worth." I didn't argue. I didn't remind them of the years I spent quietly managing their household bills, or the times I had covered Clara's personal credit card debts when her family's allowance ran dry. I pulled a pen from my pocket, flipped to the signature page, and signed the divorce decree without a second of hesitation. The family smiled, Austin letting out a triumphant laugh. But before I stood up, I reached into my jacket and pulled out a second, black leather portfolio. I set it gently next to Victoria's birthday cake. "Happy birthday, Victoria," I said quietly, my voice perfectly level. "You wanted me out of the family, and you've got it. But before I go, you might want to read the foreclosure notice on this hotel." To understand the paper trail I had just left on that table, you have to understand the crumbling empire of Vance hospitality. For the last 3 years, Victoria and Austin had been living a lie. They maintained the facade of luxury, the galas, the country club memberships, the expensive cars, but behind the scenes, their regional hotel chain was drowning in debt. Austin's terrible investments in real estate and a bloated corporate structure had left the company unable to meet its commercial loan payments. They owed $5.2 million to a major regional bank, and the loan was secured by their primary assets: the Vance Grand Ballroom, 2 historic hotels, and the family estate. What they didn't know was that my actual job was not examining insurance files. I was the founder and managing partner of Thorn Private Equity, a fund that specialized in acquiring distressed corporate debt. 2 months prior, after discovering that the Vance family's loans were about to be sent to a collection agency, I had quietly purchased their defaulting debt from the bank. I became their primary creditor. I held the mortgage on their homes, their businesses, and the very ballroom they were using to humiliate me. I had originally purchased the debt to protect Clara's heritage, intending to quietly restructure the business behind the scenes so her family wouldn't face bankruptcy. I had planned to tell her the truth on our upcoming anniversary. But as I stood at that birthday dinner, watching Clara remain silent while her mother stripped away my dignity, I realized the truth. My sacrifice was a shield for people who only used their power to crush others. The black portfolio I left on Victoria's plate contained the official declaration of default and a formal notice of foreclosure. Because Vance Hospitality had missed their 3rd consecutive quarterly payment last week, Thorn Private Equity had initiated the immediate seizure of the collateral assets. I walked out of the ballroom, the cold night air hitting my face as I unlocked my truck. The piece was over. The next morning, the corporate headquarters of Vance Hospitality was locked. By 8 a.m., my private security team and corporate auditors had taken possession of the offices. The company's servers were frozen, and the locks on the primary facilities had been changed. I was sitting in the corner office, the office that had belonged to Victoria's late husband, when my phone began to vibrate against the mahogany desk. It was Austin. I put it on speaker. His voice was screaming, distorted by panic. "Lucas, What the hell is going on? The security guards won't let me into the building. They're claiming the assets have been seized by Thorn Private Equity. Who the hell is Thorn? I am Austin, I said, my voice calm. A long, heavy silence followed. I could hear Austin's ragged breathing over the line. You? He whispered, his voice cracking. That's impossible. You're an insurance clerk. I own the debt company that purchased your default loans 2 months ago, I explained. You defaulted on the $5.2 million mortgage. The grace period ended on Friday. The assets have been seized to satisfy the debt. You no longer have an office, Austin. Hand over your corporate credit cards to the security team at the gate. Lucas, you can't do this. Austin screamed. This is our family's legacy. My father built this company. Your father built it, and you ruined it, I said. And your mother decided that $60,000 was too little for a son-in-law. It turns out, your entire net worth is currently sitting on my desk. I hung up the phone. By noon, my mother-in-law Victoria and Clara arrived at the office. They were stopped by the security detail, but I instructed the guards to let them up to the top floor. Victoria walked in first, her proud posture gone, her face pale and lined with stress. Clara followed behind her, her eyes red and puffy from crying. She looked at me, sitting in her father's old chair, and took a step back. Lucas, Clara whispered, her voice trembling. Please, tell me this is a mistake. It's not a mistake, Clara, I said, leaning back in the chair. Victoria stepped forward, her hands shaking as she gripped her designer handbag. Lucas, we are family. We can work this out. We will pay the interest. We can restructure the loan. We are not family, Victoria, I said, pulling the signed divorce agreement from my desk drawer. Your daughter signed this last night, and I finalized it this morning. Under the terms you drafted, I am officially a stranger to the Vance family. You made sure of that. Lucas, please, Clara sobbed, stepping forward. I didn't want the divorce. My mother, Austin, they pressured me. They said you were holding me back. I was scared. You were silent, Clara, I said, looking her in the eye. And in this life, silence is a choice. You sat at that table and watched them humiliate the man who had loved you for 7 years. You chose their pride. Now, you get to carry their debt. Victoria looked around the luxury office, the realization of her absolute defeat setting in. What do you want, Lucas? Are you going to throw us onto the street? No, I said, sliding a new contract across the desk. I am a businessman, not a monster. I will lease the family estate back to you for a modest monthly rent, provided you do not contest the foreclosure of the hotels. But Austin is permanently barred from the business. He has zero operational authority. Austin, who had just walked into the room behind them, let out a desperate, angry shout. You're stealing our company. I am saving what's left of it from your incompetence, Austin, I said. If you sign the foreclosure transfer today, I will set up a small trust that will pay your mother a modest stipend of $4,000 a month. If you refuse, I will initiate full liquidations tomorrow, and the estate will be auctioned by the bank. Victoria looked at her son, then at the contract. The arrogance that had defined her for decades had completely vanished, replaced by the bitter reality of survival. She took the pen and signed the transfer. The transition of Vance Hospitality to Thorn Heritage Hotels was completed within 6 months. I brought in a professional management team, restructured the bad vendor contracts, and updated the reservation systems. The hotels began turning a profit for the first time in 5 years. Clara and I finalized our divorce quietly. She received the $50,000 she had initially offered me, but nothing else. She moved into a small apartment in another town, far away from the high society circles she had spent her life trying to impress. Austin tried to file a lawsuit to contest the debt purchase, but my legal team had documented every transaction flawlessly. The court dismissed the case within 2 weeks. Without his corporate salary, he was forced to take a job as a sales representative for a local car dealership, finally having to work for the income he had always taken for granted. Victoria remained in the family estate, but she lived quietly, her circle of wealthy friends disappearing the moment they realized she no longer owned the grand ballroom. One evening, I stood on the balcony of the headquarter office, looking out at the city lights. My assistant walked in, handing me a leather folder. The audit of the hotel network is complete, Mr. Thorne. The revenue is up 40% this quarter. Thank you, Sarah, I said, taking the file. There's a letter for you, she added, handing me a small cream-colored envelope. From Clara. I looked at the handwriting, then set it on the desk unopened. Put it in the archive, Sarah. The account is settled. I walked down to the lobby of the newly renovated Thorn Grand Hotel. The space was beautiful, the dark wood polished, the warm lights reflecting off the marble floor. A young couple was standing at the reception desk, checking in for their wedding anniversary, their faces filled with genuine happiness. I smiled, realizing that true power is not about the noise you make or the diamonds you wear. It is about the boundaries you set. My ex-wife's family had believed that my quietness was a sign of weakness. They thought they could humiliate me because I didn't boast about my success or shout my worth to the room. They forgot that the strongest foundation is built in silence. I had saved their legacy, but I had reclaimed my own life. And the boundaries I had drawn were the only things that would protect my future from the storms of their greed. I walked out into the cool evening air, the harbor water calm under the moonlight. I felt a deep, absolute peace. I didn't need their appreciation or their apology. The work had spoken for itself. If this story reminded you that boundaries are the only bridge strong enough to protect your dignity, leave the word boundaries in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you on our next journey.